Imagine a city, sprawling, vibrant, home to nearly 3 million souls, slowly, methodically, being choked to death, not by gas, not by direct assault, but by the excruciating agony of starvation and the biting grip of a winter so fierce, it became an enemy unto itself. On the morning of September 8, 1941, the German noose tightened around Leningrad, the former imperial capital, a city Hitler vowed would simply die of starvation. For the next 872 days, an entire metropolis would endure a level of suffering almost beyond human comprehension. This isn't just a military history lesson, it's a profound journey into the very depths of human endurance. We will dissect the ruthless strategies designed to annihilate a population, explore the unimaginable daily horrors faced by ordinary citizens, uncover the desperate, often heartbreaking, small acts of defiance, and witness the incredible, often unsung, sacrifices that defined one of World War II's most brutal and prolonged sieges. This is the story of how a city starved, froze, and, against all odds, refused to die from the rapid encirclement and the catastrophic loss of vital food supplies. We'll trace the agonizing decline into the infamous hunger winter, the desperate gamble of the road of life, and the astonishing resilience of a people who fought back not just with weapons, but with art, culture, and sheer, indomitable will. Prepare yourself for a story of suffering, yes, but also of an unyielding spirit that defied the very definition of survival. The stage for the Leningrad tragedy was set by Operation Barbarossa, the massive Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union. Launched on June 22, 1941, this wasn't merely a conventional war. It was an ideological crusade, a brutal war of annihilation. Hitler's objectives were clear and utterly ruthless: to crush Bolshevism, seize vast territories for German colonization, and dismantle the Soviet state, seizing its immense agricultural and industrial resources for the Third Reich. Leningrad, the former imperial capital of St. Petersburg, and now the city of Lenin, held immense strategic and symbolic importance in this grand design. For Hitler, Leningrad was a target for two critical reasons. First, its strategic value was undeniable. It was the Soviet Union's second largest city, a major industrial hub churning out tanks, artillery, and vital military equipment. It housed the main base of the Soviet Baltic Fleet, a crucial naval asset. Its capture would open a direct route to the Arctic Sea and significantly destabilize the Soviet Union's northern flank. Second, and perhaps even more importantly, its symbolic value was immense. As the cradle of the revolution, the city named after Vladimir Lenin himself, its fall would be a devastating psychological blow to Soviet morale and a potent propaganda victory for the Axis. This dual importance made Leningrad a primary objective for Army Group North, commanded by Field Marshal Wilhelm Ritter von Leib. However, Hitler's intentions went beyond mere capture. He explicitly desired the city's total destruction and the annihilation of its population. His directives were chillingly clear. Leningrad must die of starvation. The city must be blockaded, not stormed. We have no interest in saving a part of the population. This order, issued shortly after the invasion began, laid the grim foundation for the unspeakable barbarity of the siege, marking it not just as a military objective, but as a deliberate act of mass extermination by deprivation. It was a cold, calculated decision that would condemn millions to slow, agonizing deaths. The initial German advance was terrifyingly swift, embodying the full destructive power of the Blitzkrieg. The Red Army, caught largely by surprise and severely weakened by Stalin's brutal pre-war purges that decimated its officer corps, struggled to mount a coherent or effective defense. Panzer divisions, led by tank titans like Guderian and Hoth, sliced through Soviet lines with surgical precision, encircling vast numbers of troops and disrupting communication. While Moscow was the primary objective for Army Group Center, Army Group North spearheaded its thrust towards Leningrad. The speed of the advance was breathtaking. Within weeks of the June 22nd invasion, German forces had advanced hundreds of kilometers, seizing key towns and cities that lay in Leningrad's path. The citizens of Leningrad, initially confident in the Red Army's ability to repel the invaders, watched with growing horror as the front lines rapidly approached their homes. News, though tightly controlled by Soviet propaganda, filtered through, painting a picture of relentless enemy progress. Desperate measures were taken to slow the onslaught. Tens of thousands of civilians, including women, children, and the elderly, were mobilized to construct makeshift defenses around the city perimeter. They dug anti-tank ditches, erected barricades, and built bunkers, often working under the constant threat of aerial reconnaissance and bombardment. These efforts, while a testament to civilian resolve, were largely improvised and insufficient against the might of the Wehrmacht. The inevitable terrifying moment arrived on September 8, 1941. On that fateful day, German forces, having captured the key town of Slisselburg, reached the shores of Lake Ladoga. This seemingly small geographical advance had catastrophic implications. It severed the last remaining land route connecting Leningrad to the rest of the Soviet Union. The Iron Ring was complete. The city of Leningrad, with its bustling population of nearly 2.9 million civilians and hundreds of thousands of military personnel, was now an island, sealed off from the outside world. The immediate impact was profound and chilling. Railway traffic ceased. Telephone lines to the mainland went dead. The realization dawned upon Leningraders with a stark, terrifying clarity. They were completely isolated. A sense of collective dread descended, replacing earlier anxieties with a grim certainty. The city, once a vibrant hub, was now a trap. One survivor, Nina Kostarina, wrote in her diary of the sudden, suffocating silence after the last trains left, a silence that spoke volumes of their newfound, terrifying isolation. The initial chaos gave way to a somber shared understanding that their struggle for survival had truly begun. They were alone, with dwindling supplies, and an enemy whose intentions were clear, not to conquer, but to extinguish. With the ring closed around Leningrad, the true horror of the siege began to unfold, revealing an enemy far more insidious and relentless than artillery or bombs. Hunger. The city had been woefully unprepared for a prolonged siege. Despite its size and strategic importance, Leningrad held only a meager 30 to 35 days' worth of food supplies for its vast population. This dire situation was catastrophically exacerbated by a single devastating event. On the very same day, the encirclement was completed. September 8, 1941, German bombers launched a devastating raid directly onto the Badaev warehouses. These colossal depots were Leningrad's largest food reserves, storing thousands of tons of flour, sugar, butter, and other vital foodstuffs. The warehouses were transformed into a raging inferno, burning for days. Thick columns of smoke billowed into the sky, and a sickeningly sweet smell of burning sugar carried on the wind permeated the city. This sweet, cloying odor became an indelible, haunting premonition of the slow, agonizing death that awaited the city. Whether this bombing was a deliberate, targeted attack on the food supply or a tragic coincidence, its impact was immediate and catastrophic. It crippled Leningrad's ability to feed itself from the outset, effectively obliterating its buffer stock on day one of the siege. This single event amplified Hitler's starvation policy, transforming a grim military strategy into an immediate, existential threat for every man, woman, and child trapped within the besieged perimeter. The city's fate was sealed. It would starve. Immediately after the encirclement and the Badaev fire, the city authorities, under the leadership of Andrei Zhdanov, scrambled to implement a rationing system. This was a desperate attempt to stretch the rapidly dwindling supplies, but the allowances were meager from the start and would only grow more so. Initially, in early September, daily bread rations were relatively normal by wartime standards. Around 800 grams for industrial workers and 400 grams for dependents. However, the cuts came swiftly and brutally. By October 1st, workers received 500 grams, white-collar employees 300 grams, and non-workers and children 250 grams. The most infamous and devastating cut arrived on November 20th, 1941. On this day, the daily bread ration plummeted to its lowest point, 250 grams for essential workers, and a pitiful 125 grams for non-essential workers, children, and dependents. To put this into perspective, 125 grams is roughly equivalent to a small slice or two of modern bread, a mere fraction of the calories needed to sustain life, especially in the extreme cold dot, and this bread was barely bread at all. It was a dark, heavy, often unbaked mass, gritty and foul-smelling, made from whatever could be found and ground into flour, rye mixed with cellulose, sawdust, and even wallpaper paste. It was indigestible for many, causing severe stomach issues. But it was, quite literally, life itself. Obtaining these meager rations was an ordeal in itself. People would queue for hours, sometimes overnight, in freezing temperatures, clutching their precious ration cards. Theft of ration cards became a common and deadly crime, as a lost card meant certain starvation. As one survivor recounted, bread in those days was like gold. The constant, gnawing hunger became the dominant force in every Leningrader's existence. It consumed thoughts, dreams, and conversations, reducing human interaction to a desperate calculus of calories and survival. The city transformed into a desolate landscape of scavengers, where every object became a potential source of sustenance. People grew skeletal, their faces hollowed out, eyes sunken and haunted. Their bodies, starved of vital nutrients, began to consume themselves, leading to dystrophy, a horrifying condition characterized by swollen limbs, a distended belly, and eventually organ failure. The very act of moving became an immense effort, as every calorie had to be conserved. Is this my body, or did it get swapped for somebody else's without me noticing? One man wondered in his diary, capturing the profound physical and psychological dissociation of extreme hunger. Desperate residents scoured the city for anything remotely edible. They boiled leather belts, turning them into a gelatinous, foul-tasting broth that offered minimal nutritional value, but a semblance of a meal. Wallpaper glue, made from animal bones, was meticulously scraped from walls and boiled into a meager, unpalatable soup. Gardens and parks, once beautiful green spaces, were stripped bare of grass, weeds, and tree bark. These desperate measures were a daily reality, a testament to the sheer desperation that gripped the city. Pets disappeared from the streets first, then stray cats, dogs, and even rats and pigeons hunted down for any available protein. With unimaginable, soul-crushing desperation, some turned to cannibalism. This was a taboo whispered in hushed tones, a horrific, final resort born of absolute extremity. The Soviet secret police, NKVD, responded with swift, brutal arrests and executions for such acts, but their occurrence, however rare, underscored the utter breakdown of societal norms under the relentless pressure of starvation. These were not acts of malice, but of the human animal pushed beyond all conceivable limits, a chilling testament to the extremity of suffering within the besieged city. As if hunger wasn't enough, the brutal Russian winter descended upon Leningrad with unforgiving ferocity. In October and November 1941, temperatures plummeted, often reaching minus 30 degrees Celsius, minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit, and frequently much lower, sometimes touching minus 40 degrees Celsius. This extreme cold amplified the suffering exponentially, turning the city into a frozen tomb. The urban infrastructure, already collapsing under the strain of war, failed completely under the icy onslaught. Heating systems stopped working as coal and wood supplies ran out. Electricity grids died, plunging the city into perpetual darkness, save for the ghostly glow of moonlight on snow or the flickering, weak light of homemade oil lamps. Water pipes froze and burst, cutting off access to clean water. Fetching water became a perilous daily ritual, requiring immense effort to break through ice on canals or rivers, often exposing people to freezing temperatures and the ever-present threat of German sniper fire or artillery to gain any semblance of warmth. People resorted to burning anything combustible: furniture, books, wooden fences, floorboards, and even parts of their own homes. The air inside apartments was thick with the acrid smell of burning wood and decaying refuse. The constant fear of freezing to death in one's own apartment, too weak to move or seek help, became a grim reality for thousands. Many were found frozen in their beds, their last breath visible as a wisp of vapor. The cold accelerated the effects of starvation. The body burned more calories, trying to stay warm, hastening the end for the already weakened. The once bustling streets became eerily silent, save for the crunch of footsteps in the snow and the distant, muffled thud of shells. People moved slowly, almost in a trance, conserving every precious calorie, every ounce of dwindling energy. Bodies, often frozen solid, lay uncollected on the streets for days or even weeks. Municipal services had collapsed, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of dead. The dead piled up in courtyards, waiting for a thaw or for the rare trucks that could transport them to mass graves. It was a silent, agonizing dying, a city transformed into a macabre landscape of human suffering and frozen despair. By January 1942, estimates suggest that as many as 100,000 people were dying per month, a scale of mortality unprecedented in a modern city. Amidst this hellish landscape of starvation and ice, a fragile thread of hope emerged from the vast expanse of frozen water. Lake Ladoga, this immense freshwater lake, partially unfrozen during early autumn, offered the only potential route for supplies, a glimmer of connection to the outside world. In September and October 1941, desperate attempts were made to ferry meager supplies across the lake by boat. These initial efforts, often conducted under constant German air attack and through treacherous, stormy waters, were heroic but proved tragically insufficient for the needs of the beleaguered city. As winter solidified the lake's surface, a new, audacious, and seemingly impossible plan was conceived to build an ice road across it. This perilous route, which would become famously known as the Road of Life, Doroga Zhizny, represented Leningrad's only chance for survival. The concept was simple in its desperation, but incredibly complex and dangerous in execution. The goal was to transport vital supplies into the city and, just as crucially, evacuate the weakest civilians out. The initial preparations were fraught with peril. Engineers had to constantly monitor the unpredictable ice thickness, which could vary wildly, even within short distances. They mapped out routes, often shifting daily, and installed beacons to guide drivers through blizzards and the perpetual darkness. The stakes were impossibly high. Every decision was a matter of life and death for millions. From late November 1941, trucks, often driven by women, began to traverse the treacherous, constantly shifting ice. The conditions were horrific, pushing both machinery and human endurance to their absolute limits. Drivers faced extreme cold, with temperatures routinely plummeting to -40 degrees Celsius, -40 degrees Fahrenheit, creating a blinding, disorienting whiteout. Blizzards could strike suddenly, reducing visibility to zero and forcing convoys to halt, leaving them exposed. The ice itself was a constant, unforgiving enemy. It was never truly stable, prone to cracking and shifting under the weight of the overloaded trucks. Countless vehicles and their precious cargo plunged into the frigid depths of the lake, dragging their brave drivers with them. German planes relentlessly bombed the convoys, targeting the slow-moving trucks on the exposed ice, and artillery shelled the route from the shore. Drivers endured days without sleep, their faces chapped by the wind and frostbitten, their bodies aching from the constant cold and tension. Many died, either by freezing, drowning, or enemy fire, but countless others bravely continued, knowing that every ton of supplies delivered meant life for someone in Leningrad. One memorable account comes from Lydia Kanava, a young woman who drove trucks on the road of life. She recounted the constant fear, the sight of trucks vanishing through the ice ahead of her, but also the grim determination. "We simply had to do it," she stated. "There was no other way." Soldiers guarded the route, clearing snow, filling cracks, and even building makeshift bridges over fissures in the ice, all under constant threat. It was a Herculean, continuous effort that transcended human limits. Despite the overwhelming dangers and losses, the Road of Life proved to be a miracle of ingenuity and sheer human will. Though initially meager, the supplies that made it through, primarily flour, but also some fuel, medicine, and vital munitions, were the literal difference between life and death for hundreds of thousands. Over its operational periods, the Road of Life transported hundreds of thousands of tons of crucial supplies. Crucially, it also allowed for the beginning of evacuations. Children, the elderly, and the sick were slowly, painfully transported out of the besieged city across the treacherous ice. Though this journey itself was fraught with immense peril, and many evacuated individuals succumbed to starvation and cold even after leaving the city. These evacuations, while saving countless lives, also reduced the city's population to a more manageable size. Stretching the remaining resources further, the Road of Life became more than just a logistical triumph. It was a powerful symbol of Soviet resistance, ingenuity, and unwavering human determination. It demonstrated that Leningrad, though surrounded, was not forgotten, and that a way, however desperate and costly, would be found. It didn't end the suffering, but it prevented the city's complete and total demise, offering a glimmer of hope that kept the city breathing through its darkest hours. Even amidst the utter devastation of starvation, cold, and constant bombardment, the spirit of Leningrad refused to be extinguished. The city became a crucible of human defiance, where the very act of survival was a political statement. Amidst the dying and the despair, life found ways to assert itself, often in the most unexpected and profoundly moving forms. Perhaps the most iconic and emotionally resonant act of cultural defiance during the siege was the performance of Dmitri Shostakovich's Symphony No. 7, famously known as the Leningrad Symphony. Shostakovich, who began composing the symphony in the city itself before his own evacuation, dedicated it to the city's heroic struggle against fascism. The decision to perform the symphony in the besieged city in the summer of 1942 was a monumental undertaking. By then, the Leningrad Radio Orchestra was decimated. Many musicians had died of starvation, others had been evacuated, and those who remained were skeletal figures, too weak to even lift their instruments. Replacements had to be found, musicians brought in from the front lines, hastily recalled from active duty, or pulled from other, less fortunate ensembles. The conductor, Karl Eliasberg, tirelessly rehearsed his emaciated orchestra, often canceling practices when musicians collapsed from exhaustion or hunger. On the evening of August 9, 1942, a date chosen specifically to coincide with Hitler's original planned date for the capture of Leningrad, the symphony was performed in the grand, unheated hall of the Leningrad Philharmonic. To ensure the performance could be heard, Soviet artillery unleashed a massive, coordinated barrage on German positions just before the concert began, silencing their guns and creating an eerie, profound quiet over the city. The hall was packed with survivors, soldiers on leave, and citizens, many of them skeletal figures wrapped in rags. As the stirring, defiant notes of the symphony filled the hall, broadcast throughout the city via loudspeakers, and even across the German lines, people cried. They cried not just from the raw beauty and power of the music, but from the overwhelming emotion of survival, the realization that their culture, their humanity, and their spirit had not been annihilated. It was a powerful, defiant statement to the world, and more importantly, to themselves. Leningrad lived. Leningrad would not fall. While Hitler chose to starve Leningrad, rather than incur the heavy casualties of a direct urban assault, the Red Army's Leningrad front maintained an iron grip on the city's defenses. Despite suffering from the same deprivation as the civilian population, the soldiers fought with incredible tenacity and courage. They held their lines, launching local counterattacks, harassing German positions, and preventing any further encroachment into the city's vital areas. Soviet commanders, under the direct orders of Stalin, were unyielding. The city must be held at all costs. This absolute directive, however brutal in its implications for human life, ensured that some resources, however meager, were diverted to the defense. Morale, though fluctuating, was bolstered by propaganda and the sheer determination to not surrender. Frontline soldiers, though gaunt and exhausted, fought knowing that behind them lay their families, their homes, and the very symbol of the revolution. Desertion was rare, punished brutally, but most importantly, antithetical to the collective will to survive. Beyond the soldiers, the workers of Leningrad played an equally vital, though often unsung, role. Despite being emaciated, working in unheated, bombed out factories. They continued to produce munitions, repair tanks, and adapt machinery to create new weapons. They worked shifts of 12 to 16 hours, often on those same starvation rations. Their labor a testament to their unwavering resolve. Their contribution was as vital as any soldiers in holding the German forces at bay. Beyond the grand acts of heroism and defiance, Leningrad's survival was built upon countless myriad small acts of personal and collective resistance, woven into the very fabric of daily life. These seemingly insignificant actions, when aggregated, formed the social glue that prevented complete societal collapse. Neighbors shared meager rations, often sacrificing their own portions to aid the weaker or the sick. The selfless actions of nurses and doctors, who continued to treat the dying in hospitals without heat, electricity, or proper medical supplies, were nothing short of miraculous. Orphanage workers struggled to care for thousands of abandoned or orphaned children, often sharing their own starvation rations to keep the youngest alive. The sheer human capacity for empathy and mutual aid, even in the face of such overwhelming despair, was a powerful, quiet form of resistance. Even education and culture, though drastically curtailed, did not entirely cease. Some teachers held classes in freezing, dark basements for the children strong enough to attend, trying to impart a semblance of normalcy and hope for a future beyond the siege. Artists, like the graphic artist Vera Mukina, continued to sketch the horrors around them, creating a visual record of the siege, a form of witness that defied the erasure of history. Librarians, against all odds, kept public libraries open, however sparsely attended, a small beacon of intellectual life in a city consumed by the primal struggle for food. The constant flow of Soviet propaganda on loudspeakers, though often viewed as manipulative, also provided a narrative of purpose, shared struggle, and eventual victory, offering a psychological anchor to the besieged populace. These small, daily acts of perseverance and humanity, often driven by the simple desire to endure, collectively ensured that Leningrad's spirit, however battered, remained unbroken. The turning point for the siege of Leningrad, and indeed for the entire Eastern Front, was the decisive Soviet victory at the Battle of Stalingrad in February 1943. This catastrophic defeat for the Wehrmacht fundamentally shifted the strategic initiative to the Red Army with renewed vigor, improved logistics, and a surge of national confidence. Soviet forces began to plan concentrated efforts to alleviate the critical situations on other fronts, including Leningrad. Stalin, emboldened by Stalingrad, was now determined to break the blockade definitively. The first major offensive, aimed specifically at breaking the Leningrad siege, was Operation Iskra, Spark, launched on January 12, 1943. This was a meticulously planned, coordinated assault involving forces from the Leningrad front, commanded by General Leonid Govorov, and the Volkhov front, led by General Kirill Meretskov. The objective was to converge on a narrow German-held corridor south of Lake Ladoga, the same area that had cut off the city in the first place. The fighting was incredibly brutal, characterized by intense artillery duels and fierce close quarters combat in deep snow and bitter cold. Soviet troops, fueled by desperation and a new strategic confidence, pushed relentlessly. After 6 days of relentless combat, on January 18, 1943, the two Soviet fronts linked up near workers' settlement No 1. This breakthrough created a narrow, 8 to 10 kilometer wide land corridor, finally reconnecting Leningrad by rail to the rest of the Soviet Union. It was a pivotal moment, a crack in the seemingly unbreakable German iron ring. While Operation Iskra did not completely end the siege, the city remained under threat of bombardment. It was a monumental psychological and logistical victory. Immediately, a makeshift railway line, famously dubbed the Road of Victory, was hastily constructed across this newly liberated corridor. Within weeks, the first trains laden with vital supplies, primarily food, began to arrive in Leningrad. Bread rations, though still limited, increased significantly, and the immediate, acute threat of total starvation began to recede for the first time in over a year. The city breathed a collective, albeit cautious, sigh of relief. The worst of the hunger winter was over, and hope, for the first time, felt tangible. Despite the success of Operation Iskra, German forces still held strong defensive positions around Leningrad, and the city remained under intermittent artillery fire and the threat of renewed isolation. The full, definitive lifting of the siege required a larger, more comprehensive offensive. This came a year later, with the powerful, coordinated Soviet offensive launched in January 1944, known as the Leningrad-Novgorod Offensive. This was a massive operation involving multiple Soviet armies from the Leningrad, Volkhov, and Second Baltic fronts. The offensive began with overwhelming artillery bombardments that shattered German defenses, followed by concerted ground attacks across a wide front. German forces, already weakened by continuous fighting on other sectors of the Eastern Front and facing a relentless Soviet push, found their positions untenable. They were systematically outmaneuvered, outflanked, and eventually forced into a desperate retreat. On January 27, 1944, after 872 agonizing days, the siege of Leningrad was officially and decisively lifted. The remaining German forces were driven far from the city's outskirts, eliminating the immediate threat of further encirclement or bombardment. The news swept through the battered city, igniting an outpouring of raw, unbridled joy and relief. Celebrations erupted spontaneously in the streets, tears flowed freely, and the sounds of church bells, long silent, rang out across the city, a triumphant peal signaling the end of an unparalleled ordeal. It was a hard-won freedom, forged in unimaginable suffering and sacrifice. The lifting of the siege brought immense relief, but it could not erase the scars left on Leningrad and its people. The cost of those 872 days was staggering, making it one of the most destructive and deadly sieges in human history. While official Soviet figures were initially lower, modern estimates confirm that over 1 million Leningraders died during the siege. The vast majority of these deaths, likely over 90%, were due to starvation, cold, and disease, not from German shells or bullets. This horrifying statistic underscores the chilling reality of Hitler's policy: the systematic extermination of a population through deprivation. For context, this single city's civilian death toll approached the total military and civilian losses of the United States and the United Kingdom combined in World War II. The statistics, however grim, can never fully convey the scale of individual human tragedy. Entire families perished, leaving behind empty apartments, silent streets, and a city haunted by its dead. The renowned diary of Tanya Savicheva, a young girl who recorded the deaths of her entire family during the siege. Zhenya died on deck 28 at 12:30 p.m., 1941. Grandma died on January 25th at 3 p.m., 1942. Lika died on March 17th at 5 a.m., 1942, concluding with, "The Sadashevs are dead. Everyone is dead. Only Tanya is left," became a harrowing symbol of the widespread devastation. Thousands of similar, unspoken tragedies unfolded across the city. The physical destruction of Leningrad was also immense, with countless buildings damaged or destroyed by bombing and shelling, but it was the human toll that truly marked the city. For the survivors, known as blokadniki, the ordeal of the siege never truly ended. They carried the physical and psychological scars for the rest of their lives. Many suffered long-term health consequences from severe malnutrition, including chronic heart conditions, digestive issues, and weakened immune systems. The psychological trauma was equally profound. Indelible memories of hunger, the sight of dead bodies, the loss of loved ones, and the constant fear. Many struggled with survivor's guilt, while others found themselves permanently altered by the extreme conditions they endured. The siege fundamentally shaped the city's identity and its people for generations. It became a central pillar of Soviet war propaganda, a powerful symbol of national resilience during the Great Patriotic War. Leningrad was proudly bestowed the title of Hero City, its enduring spirit held up as an example of unwavering courage. Even today, the memory of the siege is deeply ingrained in St. Petersburg, as Leningrad is now known, commemorated with solemn ceremonies, museums, and monuments, serving as a powerful testament to the collective memory of suffering and triumph. The siege of Leningrad offers profound and timeless lessons. It stands as a stark warning against the weaponization of hunger and the indiscriminate suffering of civilians in armed conflict. It reminds us of the horrifying depths of human cruelty, of the calculated barbarity that can arise when dehumanization takes root. Yet it also reveals the astonishing power of human endurance, the indomitable will to survive, and the capacity for solidarity and self-sacrifice, even in the face of absolute despair. The story of Leningrad underscores the importance of humanitarian aid, the preservation of human dignity, and the enduring power of culture and community to sustain life in the darkest of times. It is a chapter of history that demands our remembrance, not just for the horrors endured, but for the profound lessons it offers about the human spirit's ability to resist, endure, and ultimately prevail. The siege of Leningrad was more than just a military encirclement. It was a profound, agonizing test of the human spirit. It was a testament to the fact that hope can flicker even when the body is failing, that art can defiantly bloom amidst bombs, and that a city, through sheer, unyielding human will, can refuse to fall. It stands as a stark, unforgettable chapter in history, reminding us of the immense depths of human cruelty, but also of the astonishing power of endurance, solidarity, and the unbreakable spirit that can emerge from the crucible of unimaginable suffering. What aspect of Leningrad's survival do you find most astonishing? And what lessons from this harrowing story do you believe are most relevant for us to remember today? If you were moved by this profound story and wish to explore more fragments of history, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for deeper dives into the untold narratives of war and empires. Your support helps us bring these crucial stories to light. And don't forget to leave a comment below sharing your thoughts or suggesting which historical event or empire you'd like to see covered next.